The London Gem and Mineral Show is back, taking place at Sandown Park Racecourse on Saturday the 23rd and Sunday the 24th of November. Experience the best of the crystal, mineral and fossil industry as we gather the finest specimens over 2 unforgettable days. You can discover hands-on workshops and activities, crack open your own geodes and delve into talks from the industry experts. And not forgetting that the Opal Whisperers from the Discovery Channel are back, coming all the way from Australia with some show-exclusive pieces in tow. So what are you waiting for? Join us for an immersive journey at the London Gem and Mineral Show, where traders and enthusiasts alike are invited to discover the Earth's natural treasures all under one roof. Book now at thegemandmineralshow.com or follow us on Instagram at The Gem and Mineral Show. We'll see you there. Want to discover London like never before? Step beyond the surface with Wow Tours. Explore the city's hidden spiritual secrets, walk ancient ley lines and uncover the mysteries of London's past, present and future. Brought to you by Wisdom on Wellness and led by renowned crystal author and Akashic Records reader Gemma Petherbridge, these are more than just tours. They're journeys into the heart of London's esoteric history. Book your spot today and see London through a whole new lens. Visit wowtourslondon.com for tickets. Hello and welcome back to the Wow Talks podcast. In today's episode, our host Sarah Lamptey sat down with the incredible Taylor James, an award-winning podcaster and mental health advocate, and this was recorded live at WowFest this year. Taylor is the creator and host of the Waffle Shop podcast, which he launched after facing challenges with his own mental health. He turned his struggle into an opportunity to start open and honest conversations on his own terms. And since then, he's had really inspiring chats with guests like Ed Sheeran, Sean Paul, and Sophie Ellis-Bextor, which is pretty incredible. So now Taylor is on a mission to get everybody waffling about mental health, coping mechanisms, and the music that helps us through it all. And let's dive into his powerful journey and discover how we can all join the conversation. We hope you enjoy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Talk Span. We've been doing some brilliant conversations today, I have to say. I've been leading them, a slight bias there, but the people, the guests we've had have been brilliant. Of course, you are no exception. We've grabbed you from another part of the site and this is going to be a great conversation because you are a proper conversationalist.
Just nosy. That's the thing. I think
nosy.
anyone who says they're a good commentator would just purely nosy. And now I've made a career out of it.
That's part of it though, isn't it? How's it been today so far?
It's been surreal. Like I was saying, it's been quite a journey, but like 4 years ago, if you would have told me that the podcast would have done what it's done, as it is, but the fact that we're now at a festival with our own stage it's bucket list. It's mental. That's all I keep saying. It's mental.
It is, but it's so well deserved. Of course, we're here with Taylor James of the Waffle Shop podcast, and it's wicked. It's so brilliant and so funny, and the guests you have are absolutely huge. And it's just 4 years ago that you started it. So
4 years ago, by accident, a few tequilas, bit of trauma, and then it's just kind of completely changed the course of my life, and I still haven't found the word for it yet to describe quite the impact that it's had. It's quite surreal.
The word seismic, I don't want to put it into your head, but it does feel seismic. It's a good one. Because before 4 years ago, tell me what it was like, or what was the lead up to it, and how did it change the course of your life so hugely?
Basically, I think to fair, any kind of like musician or someone who goes through something will tell you it's like there's something quite beautiful can be born out of a lot of painful experiences or trauma. But a few years ago, I nearly lost my mum, unfortunately, to an operation that went horribly wrong. She's now in a neurological care home, learning how to kind of use her hands and communicate. And in the process of kind of going through what I was going through and having to show up every day at the hospital, having these really difficult conversations with doctors, is when I really started to experience mental health. Didn't really know what it was. And then I started to spiral, and it kind of got to a stage where I questioned whether I wanted to continue living my life the way it was going. And I say that quite candidly now, because it wasn't a case of me not wanting to continue living at all. I was just scared of where I was going if I was to continue to live my life the way it was being lived. So in the midst of all that, I decided one day to sit down and just get it all off my chest. Still don't know why I recorded it, put it out in the world, and then the response I got back was, I'm so glad you spoke about this. I've been feeling like this. I've been through this. And I think it was for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was on my own. And the rest is history. It's surreal.
So, yeah, you're not sure why you recorded it, but something kind of compelled you to record it. Was that, in the act of recording it, sort of motivating, or was it that you knew this, hey, this is going to be of value if I feel like this? So many other people will. What drew you to it?
Yeah, do you know what? I think it was fear. Like it was, the first episode went out a few days before we went into the pandemic, like into full lockdown. And I was just about to turn 30, and I've always kind of put everyone else first. Everyone else's needs, I'd go above and beyond for everyone else. And I just thought, you know what? I've got this idea. What is the worst that could happen? And I think it got to a stage where the fear of not doing it outweighed the fear of doing it. And for anyone who's got any slight passion or an idea, just go for it. Because if you were told that version of Taylor 4 years ago, that 4 years on, he'd have his own stage at a festival, you just got to start. You just got to go for it.
And that people pleasing, I think so many people can relate to. I certainly can. Is that a tendency that you still sort of slip into, and where do you think that came from?
I think I was raised by an incredibly strong woman. I practically raised my younger sister. So I think I always kind of filled a role that I had to kind of protect my mom, protect my sister, look after like the family home. So I feel like it was always there. And then it slowly started to filter out into like career and friendships. And I was always that friend who organised like the festivals we would go to or the nights out kind of thing. But yeah, it has been a very big lesson into you don't have to do that. Like everyone's on their own journey, but you can put that amount of energy, time and love into yourself. So it's been a big wake-up call, to be fair, the podcast.
And the massive part of the podcast is the music, of course.
Yes.
And I think it's such a brilliant concept. I don't know if you haven't heard it, it's so fantastic. Of course, it's interviews and it's connection and it's stories meets music. And the music really is the soundtrack to your life. And when I was sort of hearing it, I was thinking, you know, music can really soothe you, but it can really sort of rub salt in the wound as well. And sometimes that's quite nice, even in just the act of like revisiting a certain song will remind you of a certain time. And that's really beautiful, but can be really, really hard. How did it come to be, and how did that kind of concept happen?
To be fair, it was out of a coping mechanism. So music, I mean, I have no musical talent whatsoever, like in the slightest, but it's always been there as a coping mechanism. Like if I'm a little bit stressed or there's too much going on, my headphones are in, like I'm off. Even to a gig, like having that 2 hours of just not worried about anything else other than the music, the people I'm with, is quite precious to me. And everyone talks about like the good songs, like what gets you on the dance floor, or, you know, the first song or the first dance at your wedding. It was always those. But I was like, well, what song makes you cry? Yeah. Like what album, when you were going through a real bad time, what got you through it? But I love what you said about the kind of, it takes you back to that moment. Before everything happened with my mom, we went to see Adele, and it was the last gig we went to together before everything happened. And she sang Hometown Glory. And my mom's always been very forthcoming with like, well, that's the song I want at my funeral. Then it got to a stage where I was planning a funeral like quite consistently with the scares that we had with my mom's health. I remember hearing it in Asda, right next to the Uncle Ben's rice. And literally even saying it, like I've got like the chills. And I just remember like snot crying in the middle of Asda next to the Uncle Ben's rice, hearing this song. So yeah, I love the fact that it can take you to those moments, and it's also a really nice reminder of just how far you've come as well. So
and Adele will make you cry at the best of times,
all the time,
let alone the worst of times.
We've all done it. We've all pretended to be in a music video at some point.
Next to Uncle Ben's, absolutely. And so that podcast, so taking you back to the beginning 4 years ago, of course, and you talk about the podcast really as saving your life and being just a lifeline for you. Tell me in what way it was, and I suppose it was the connection that you're talking about. No, let me not put words in your mouth. You tell me.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. It was the connections that I made. Like, I was so lost and angry and just in this real nasty bubble of I didn't know who I was or where I was going. I was just felt like that was the role that I'm always going to have to play now with everything that was going on with my mum. And it gave me my voice. It gave me all these kind of coping mechanisms. Like, I've met some of the most incredible people through just doing nothing but having a conversation. I've picked up some incredible coping mechanisms just by sitting down like, well, what works for you? Because I've tried all of this, it didn't work. What works for you? But it was the connection. It's given me a voice, and it's also given me the confidence that you're enough. You're okay exactly how you are. So yeah, it's quite a bold statement to make, but I genuinely believe that bloody waffle saved my life.
Absolutely. And you talked about this experience looking after your mum and your sister. So was it just the three of you sort of growing up?
Kind of, yeah. So I didn't. My dad was around, but I didn't have a great relationship with him. I've got a younger brother as well, who very different path to what I'm on. But at home, it was just predominantly like the three of us.
And so there was a pressure. Did you feel a pressure to basically be the person looking after everyone else? You sort of said that. And how much did gender sort of come into that?
100%.
There's the expression man of the house and all of this. Yeah.
It's a very kind of toxic role. I think as men, we feel like we have to play. And it wasn't, again, until the conversations that I was having that I was just like, you can be like that without the pressure. Like, you can run a house without feeling like, because I'm a man, I have to do that. And to that, I'm quite lucky in a sense because I watched the most incredible woman do it. So everything that I learned from her. But yeah, it was very toxic thought process and mindset to be in, thinking, well, I can't show weakness, I can't cry, I can't say how I'm feeling because my mum has it so much worse. And that's just my scenario. This is a worldwide thing when it comes to men. But it's okay, like, we're allowed, it's very normal. And I think from the conversations that I've had, whether it's been like, Edge, I hate doing this.
Of course we were going to talk about Ed Sheeran, of course we were.
But like, it doesn't matter if you've got like Grammys on the shelf, you're standing out Wembley, you're an Olympic athlete, you're feeling exactly the same emotions as what we're all feeling. So that's been a very like recurring theme, I think, across, regardless of who you are, it's human emotion. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream and shout, because it's completely normal.
And the more conversations you have, and we have, but you have particularly, the more normal it's going to feel. And so important. I just was thinking about at the start, it must have, I wonder whether it did feel a bit contradictory because you almost need to have confidence or some sort of sense of self and self-esteem in order to talk about your vulnerability. Did you feel like that at all?
That's a tricky one with me because I still struggle with confidence and low self-esteem. I have to really hype myself up even to do things like this. So that's why I appreciate it so much because there's a past version of me that was so scared to talk or even step a foot out of line because of what the judgment, I guess, or the fear. But yeah, I don't know. I just think I'm not a religious person or in the slightest, but there was something quite clearly on that day that pushed me to release that first episode. And I'm so grateful of that version of Taylor did it.
Yeah, well done. It's incredible. How do you manage the feeling of vulnerability once it's out? And do you then, with that sort of, those moments of dips in confidence, do you think, oh God, how is this going to be received? Or what's someone going to say? Of course, as we know, it's the online sphere, which is a bloody horrible place at times. How do you manage the after bit that comes next?
I'm probably the worst podcaster because I don't look at numbers. I don't understand chart positions or anything like that. I just get the email to be like, oh yeah, that's okay. And then I'm like, okay, I just carry on because I think it was never created for fame or to do what it's doing. It was just because it was an outlet. I needed to talk. But there's certain episodes that I do get a little bit scared if I'm kind of oversharing a little bit or kind of being a little bit too honest with certain situations in my life. But at the same time, then I have a reminder of like, well, I wouldn't be in this position if I wasn't supposed to be vulnerable and open. So I feel like it has kind of created a platform there. Like, it's okay to talk about this because someone might not agree with you, but at the same time, that experience happened to me. So I'm going to talk about it, because if one person agrees, there's probably 10, 15 people over here that might have been through something similar to what I have. So it's scary, but it's also part of the fun. Like, I love it so much.
You're sort of constantly pushing yourself. And but obviously you're connecting with so many people. There is this part that's nourishing for yourself. And that keeps you doing it and fueling and knowing that you're helping so many people. What constitutes oversharing? You said that, I had to ask. what was sort of like constitute oversharing for you?
I think when it started, it was very kind of like mental health. It was very like, I'm talking about like my anxiety, like depression and things that I'd been through, like the real serious stuff. But then the more I was talking about it, the easier it was becoming to talk about it. But then I fell into a trap of focusing so much like on mental health that I was ignoring a huge part of my life, whether it was like the funny moments or like the embarrassing moments, those kind of things that I just wouldn't talk about. And then I was just like, well, it's all part and parcel. Like, it's all part of life. So, yeah, it's had to evolve with me, because that version of Taylor 4 years ago isn't this version of Taylor, like, that exists. And, you know, everyone's got a funny story or, like, those embarrassing moments that have just slowly now become part of the show. Even, like, the bad stuff, like, you just don't mention names because... Yeah. I can't be bothered with the legal side of things.
The legal, I don't want to get shut down when you've got so much to do. But you are so busy. You're really, really busy. When you sort of look at you on Instagram, there's so much going on. Is this sort of intentional? I was wondering about how you manage downtime. And we talk about mental health and about, you know, it's never really linear or upwards, is it? We do have our moments. So tell me about that busyness particularly. Was that on purpose?
I'm the worst person for this, actually, and it's quite timely that this question's been asked. I'm awful at it, and I almost...
Awful at being busy or awful at not being busy?
Of saying no to things, to be fair, and it's quite a toxic trait of mine that I'm kind of really understanding, because I almost wear the whole being busy thing almost as a badge of honour. Like, oh, I'm so busy, I'm doing this, doing this, but... I'm not as young as I used to be. Like that, my body cannot keep up with that. So I'm really exploring at the moment in terms of not just listening to like external factors, like internal factors, like, you know, my body's behaving in a certain way. Like I'm discussing things like cortisol levels at the moment and all these kind of different aspects of physical health. So mental health I can talk about, like I can kind of manage. The physical side of things now is where my attention needs to be. But yeah, I don't think...
The attention needs to be for yourself, for your listeners,
yes.
Or for both.
Yeah. And I think it's a journey. Like the more we talk about it, the more people might be like, oh, actually, I can resonate with that. And we shouldn't be, you know, running ourselves down into the ground like it's not healthy. Like it's okay to stop. We're supposed to rest. We're supposed to recover. So it's really that I'm trying to explore at the moment, because, yeah, it's not a healthy thing to do. It's great to be busy, but there's also something incredibly beautiful in boredom. We look at boredom as if it's like a real bad negative thing, like, oh, I'm bored. Well, actually, are you bored, or have you got a period of time where you can rest, you can recover, so then when things do get busy, you're on your A game? So,
I also think being bored is such a luxury, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're not worried about something, or you can have someone to grieve for, or whatever it might be. I mean, being bored is actually like, think about how great that is.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, but my daughter's 2.5. I just feel like I'm never bored, and I also never sleep. But anyway, you've had such fantastic guests. Which stand out to you as being sort of the most memorable episodes, apart from Ed Sheeran?
Yeah, a few of them were in the audience, so I have to be careful what I say. One of them to in particular, and I know if you look at it, like there's a lot of names on there that people will be very familiar with. However, the one that will forever stand out to me is I recorded it very early on in the journey with One of my mum's best friends, her name's Joy, and she unfortunately lost her life to cancer, but she had such a zest for life. And I was very fortunate to sit down and have a conversation with her about her mindset, what she was going through, the legacy she wanted to leave for her children. And then unfortunately, like a few months after it was recorded and released, unfortunately she passed away. And I still get messages every so often from like her children to say, I remember what my mum sounds like. And it's stuff like that. So yeah, fair play to the other guests and stuff, but that one to me, like, I just feel like we had such an incredible conversation. And when I do have a down day, like, it's which is a nice little reminder. Even seeing like there was two magpies when I first got here, and two of them, obviously, one for sorrow, two for joy. And I just every now and again, I just feel like it's a nice little nod to, you've got this. So, yeah.
She's called Joy as well.
And she's called Joy.
Beautiful. Yeah. What have you learned through the podcast? You talked about the evolution of it and where you want to take it. Yeah, where do you want to take it, and what have you learned actually?
I think the biggest thing that I have learned is, like, it's okay to talk. It's okay to disagree with people. It's taught me how to have difficult conversations. So that's one of the biggest lessons. But where I want to take it would be probably more live events. I think when it started, it was all through Zoom. It was all very behind a screen. And to be fair, I probably wouldn't have been able to get some of the guests that I've had if it was in a studio and stuff. But it has now grown into my full-time job. Like, I've managed to open a studio, so I'm now creating podcasts for other people. But I think it's the live element, it's the connection. So if we can kind of have a waffle, but more in a kind of like a live setting, like bring in more voices, have more of a kind of like diverse opinion, I think that's where I want to take. Because I feel like talking about mental health is incredibly important. And it's been a big part of my journey, and it will forever be a part of my journey. But there is so much more to learn. Like, I don't know how to like use a washing machine properly, and like all these kinds of. I'm not that's what it's going to start.
Google that.
Yeah, that's not what it's going to turn into. But like, it's all these different like life lessons that I used to get told off as a kid for asking questions. I was always like, "Oh, you talk too much."
Who told you off for that?
My mom, my dad, teachers, like pretty much everyone. So it's just quite, I don't know, ironic now that I'm in a position where my full-time job is to either ask questions or help other people ask those kind of questions. So yeah, it's a real mixed bag, and I think that's the luxury of it. Like, I haven't called it like the mental health podcast or anything like that. So I feel like, as you can tell, like, I can waffle about anything. You give me a subject, whether I know anything about it or not, I'm like a dog with a bone. So yeah, it's.
How do you approach the interviews then? Because again, that's sort of going back to confidence. I feel like it sort of takes confidence to in, I don't know how long they are. Are they about an hour? Do you record for an hour?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you have to sort of go, like, okay, I'm going to suspend any sort of thought in my mind. I'm going to go in. I'm going to be very open. Or how do you approach it? Because you must get in an hour. You must go into all sorts of areas, and maybe we're not all experts in everything, are we? So yeah, how do you sort of feel good in that?
Again, the worst possible podcaster. Minimal research.
That should be your new.
Yeah, the worst podcaster. I'll take that title. I'll do about 10 minutes worth of research before we hit the record button. Sometimes, obviously, I'll know certain elements about the guest or their journey or like what they've been through. But other than that, like, there's a lot of podcasts out there that are so heavily researched and it's almost like there's part of conversations that I feel like, especially now, having that skill of listening, almost parts of the conversation get skipped over because like it's so almost over-scripted or over-prepared. So yeah, I'll do about 10 minutes research before I hit the record button and then see what happens. See where it goes.
I think that is brilliant. And I think, so much of what we're talking about today is obviously being in the moment. We always say the words being in the moment, but actually this is a really huge example of that, because actually 10 minutes is so, I was thinking, God, that's brilliant. I'm just saving myself loads of time. But I totally get that, because the fact is that you really are enhancing the listening. And that is, as a podcaster, I don't think you're the worst podcaster.
No.
I think you might be the best. I was wondering about any challenging or particularly painful conversations conversations. You talked about joy. Was there anything aside from that? That sounds beautiful as well. Perhaps maybe painful in retrospect at times. Anything that was unexpected or challenging?
Yeah, there was one in particular. I'd been following the guy for a while, and I reached out and said, like, this is brand new territory for the podcast. And it was a guy who had experienced something horrific as a child, and was only just kind of like opening up and talking about it. And I was really petrified of being, not telling his story correctly, or being too, I guess, like insensitive, like to what he had been through in his journey. So it was really difficult. Like it was probably the one episode that I've really been in my head about. His name's Ryan Gadsby. He is just the most remarkable young man like I've ever met. And to be able to go through what he went through, and then to be able to stand up and not only tell his journey, but now he's built a platform to help other people who have been through what he's been through. So there was a layer of pressure, I guess, to do it justice, but it was an area that I've never delved into, or almost kind of been scared to have that conversation. But the outcome of it was just the most incredible conversation. And yeah, it was an honor to kind of hear firsthand him tell his story. But yeah, it doesn't make it any easier at all. But yeah, I'm very grateful that he agreed to join me for that.
And tell me what's next. What do you hope for in the future?
I honestly have no idea. I'm just kind of like winging it and having a laugh along the way at the moment. But I think more conversations, like I said, like more live events. And yeah, just kind of keep on this journey. Like, as much as I know it's a podcast, but it sounds really cheesy, but like it's so much more than that. Like, there's people here that I would only know because of the podcast. So it's kind of built this kind of community. So if I can kind of keep building on that and having a laugh along the way and keep learning, I think that's the goal.
And it's brilliant. Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for talking to us. Taylor James, everyone.
Thank you for listening to our Wow Talks podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And we'd love for you to share your own wisdom on wellness. Join the conversation, share this episode with a friend, or follow us on social media for more updates at Wisdom on Wellness. Until next time.